The world of plants has much more variety than you might imagine. It's not just roses and tulips. Some of the real plants that exist in the world are even stranger and more bizarre than those you'd expect to find in legendary works of fiction. Here are 20 exotic plants you never imagined existed. But before we start, make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Now, let's get started. Number 1. Living stones, lithops. Also known as lithops, these plants are yet another mystery of the plant kingdom and one of the smartest visually. They grow mainly in South Africa, and their name comes from their ability to perfectly camouflage among the stones in their environment. But why would they do that? Simple. Many animals love to eat plants. To avoid being eaten, they evolved to look like stones, fooling even the most attentive eyes. Over time, they even developed textures with tiny cracks, perfectly mimicking rock markings. They look like stones, but they are alive, and that only proves how amazing nature can be, even when it seems still. Number 2. The Venus flytrap. This is perhaps one of the most iconic and even brutal plants in history. The Venus flytrap, or as many know it, the Venus trap. I don't need to go into too much detail here, you probably already know how it works. It's a carnivorous plant that does everything to attract insects, including emitting a sweet scent that serves as bait. When an insect, let's say a fly, lands on the mouth of the plant, the sides slowly start to close until it's completely trapped. From there, digestion begins. These plants seem like something out of a nightmare, especially if you imagine a giant version of them devouring people, like in the movie The Little Shop of Horrors. Luckily, that remains fiction. But for insects, it's the end of the line. Number 3. Sensitive plant. Many people simply can't understand this plant. The reason it's called the sensitive plant is quite curious. It moves when touched by humans or other animals. Its delicate leaves fold inward and wilt when touched or shaken, and after a few moments, they return to their normal position. This kind of rapid movement is very rare in plants, but this one almost seems to have a mind of its own. It can react to temperature changes, vibrations in the ground, and even to someone simply blowing on it. It's as if it were truly alive, sensitive in every sense, and that's why it fascinates everyone who comes across it. Number 4. Welwitschia. At first glance, the Welwitschia plant might look like it's already dead, but I can assure you, it's not. It just looks that way. You'll find it in the Namib Desert in Africa, you know, that place where people like us go on vacation all the time. The truth is, this plant is very much alive despite its worn-out appearance. The botanist who named the plant was so amazed when he found it that he was afraid to touch it, thinking it was an optical illusion. And there's good reason for such astonishment. This plant can be thousands of years old, all thanks to its lifestyle adapted to the desert. Number 5. White baneberry. The white baneberry is one of the most unique plants you'll see on any list. Just by its appearance, it grabs attention. Its fruits look a lot like eyes, which earned it the nickname doll's eyes. But whatever you do, never touch this plant, and especially not its berries. The entire plant is poisonous to humans, from root to leaves. The little berries contain cardiogenic toxins that can immediately affect the heart muscle, having a strong sedative effect, and are the most lethal part of the plant. Ingesting them can lead to cardiac arrest and eventually death. Symptoms of poisoning include vomiting, delirium, and stomach cramps that can last for hours. Despite this, deaths are relatively rare. Interestingly, birds are immune to the plant's toxins and eat the berries normally, which helps spread its seeds. Small mammals can also eat the seeds, but not the pulp. It is said that Native Americans used the baneberry roots in their herbal medicines and rituals. There are reports that the Blackfoot tribe used it as a remedy for colds and coughs. Number 6. Red poppies. This one might not surprise you as much as the others on the list, because many people already know about poppies, even if just from something simple like The Wizard of Oz. They were the flowers that made Dorothy and her friends fall asleep after being trapped in a field full of them. The irony is double. First, that was technically accurate in the movie. California poppies and others like them are known for being used as sedatives, which can indeed make people sleepy. Of course, just smelling the flower isn't enough to cause that, but since the poppies were there in the movie, who knows? Maybe it was something even more intense. In other words, movie magic. Another type of poppy I want to highlight is the red poppy many of you have probably seen at Veterans Day parades. There's a reason this flower gets so much attention. During World War I, there were battles so devastating they not only took human lives, but wiped entire villages off the map. In 1915, when winter passed and soldiers looked out over some of the fields that remained, red poppies bloomed there. This sight inspired a Canadian soldier named John McCrae to write the poem In Flanders Fields, published that same year, about the burial fields. The teacher and humanitarian Moyna Michael, moved by the poem, launched a campaign for the poppy to be officially recognized as a symbol of remembrance. Many people embraced the idea. That's why artificial versions of the flower are often made and distributed during these events as a way to honor soldiers and all they endured. This shows how a single flower can have a huge impact on a community, being linked to different meanings. And this is just the beginning. Number 7. Cape Sundew. Here's another plant with a pretty unique look, the Cape Sundew, found in South Africa, hence the name. It's another carnivorous plant, but I'll focus on a different aspect that makes it exotic. The Cape Sundew is one of the easiest plants to grow in the world, which is already a plus. But consider how big it can get and the number of seeds produced by a single plant. It has huge potential to grow anywhere. That's why it's one of the many invasive species you might find around the world, or cause to become invasive if you're not careful, as Florida can confirm. Having an invasive species nearby is never a good idea, so it's worth staying alert. Number 8. Bladderwort, Urtiga bexiga. Ready to meet another plant that loves to devour insects without a care? Let me introduce you to the bladderwort. These plants are strange from top to bottom, and since there are many species spread around the world, they tend to behave differently depending on where they grow. For example, some can self-pollinate, while others rely on insects for pollination. It all depends on the species. What most of them have in common are bladder-shaped traps used to attract insects and then digest them. Sometimes these plants hide underground or underwater to catch their prey and get what they want. The walls of the bladders are very thin and transparent, yet sturdy enough to hold their shape, even with the vacuum created inside. They really suck in insects and don't give them a chance to escape. Number 9. Hammer orchid. When you look at the hammer orchid, you might think you're seeing two plants in one because they seem to be clinging to each other, but that's not true. They're actually a single plant, which makes it pretty strange on its own. Equally important, you'll only find this type of plant in Western Australia. There are 10 variations of it, and all exist in that region. Talk about not spreading out right now, here's where things get really weird. The way it pollinates is through a very specific wasp from the area. The plant uses its structure to trick the wasp, making it think it's a mate. The wasp then tries to carry that part of the plant with it, but ends up failing. Even so, the plant still gets pollinated. Number 10. Monkey tail cactus. You might be surprised to know that many people like cacti much more than you'd imagine, and I'm one of them. The monkey tail cactus is unique because it doesn't grow with a large stem and some arms like desert cacti. Instead, it grows in clusters and, because of its size and shape, really looks like monkey tails. The flowers are amazing. It's said to be a great plant to give as a gift, serving as a base for growing others. An irony about this cactus is that if you want to grow it at home, you need to be careful with the amount of water. If you overdo it, you'll end up killing the plant. Number 11. California pitcher plant. As I've already mentioned, there are many plants that don't have a friendly relationship with insects, since they eat them, but also use them as pollinators. The California pitcher plant is one of them and definitely falls into the killer category. Interestingly, in some places it's called the tongue snake because when fully grown, the plant's head looks like a snake ready to strike. Although it's a pitcher plant, it doesn't behave like the others you might know. For example, other types of pitcher plants that grow in America have an open mouth to collect rainwater and help trap prey. However, this California plant doesn't do that. It uses its roots to absorb and regulate water as needed. Number 12. Giant water lily. It can definitely be said that this plant is unlike any other on this list because the giant water lily doesn't behave like the others, nor does it look similar. And no, it's not just because it rests on the surface of the water and slightly above it. Another important thing is, when I talk about the giant water lily, am I referring to the flowers or the leaves, the plates of the water lily? Technically, both. The flowers are the focus because they come in various shapes and colors, making them some of the most enchanting flowers, not just for gifting but also for painting, as many artists have proven. But don't underestimate the leaves, as they have an important role alongside the flowers. The leaves need the water to be cold for everything to grow well and not be consumed by algae. The reason you see them alongside the leaves of the giant water lily is because they protect the roots from the sun, helping keep everything cool. It's a very symbiotic relationship that many other plants and animals could learn from. Number 13. Bat flower. Now, here's a plant with many names, and one of them is actually bat flower, mainly because of its black color and overall shape. Here things get interesting. Unlike the flowers I've shown so far, this one doesn't need help to pollinate itself and, as far as I know, doesn't emit a bad smell. This is a rare plant that can self-pollinate, which isn't very common among plants. There's debate about how it developed this ability, especially since it consumes flies and other creatures that enter it. Apparently, that's exactly what it wants to do. But it works, and that's enough for the bat flower. It's frequently used in traditional Chinese medicine, with uses ranging from common illnesses to more complex conditions like cancer. I'm not saying it cures cancer, but it's been proven that various parts of the flower, including its stems, are used in remedies to treat high blood pressure, gastric ulcers, burns, and much more. Medicine in many ways, so something like this isn't that far-fetched after all. Number 14. Hyuraphriana. The Hyuraphriana is an incredibly unique flower, with many features different from the plants I've talked about so far. But it also emits a smell to attract insects and other creatures, helping with pollination and the growth of its species. The good news is that Hyuraphriana is truly unique. Just like the second corpse flower I mentioned, this plant is also parasitic by nature, needing to find a host to grow because it can't grow on its own. Equally important, some scientists consider it the most primitive plant in the world today because of its growth processes and how it forms when mature. Additionally, it doesn't grow like you might imagine. Most of the plant grows entirely underground, showing that it doesn't need sunlight but rather a host to feed on. When ready to bloom, it produces a fruit that looks like an open mouth and exudes an odor that attracts insects for pollination. Seen from above, this flower even resembles a monster, maybe even one of the creatures from the movie Tremors. Regardless, it's a scary plant and yet another proof that plants can be truly sinister when it comes to the right species. Number 15. African starflower. This is a name you probably never imagined putting together to describe a plant, but it's true. In Africa, there's a plant that, when fully bloomed, looks exactly like a starfish. They are known as carnivorous plants because they emit a strong smell that attracts insects. As you might guess, the plant is designed to attract those who like rotten meat. In fact, its bloom has 5 fingers and is colored in a way that resembles meat. It's gross, but apparently very effective. The difference is that, unlike the other plants I mentioned, this one not only attracts insects, but also eats them. The African starflower devours flies and other insects that enter its mouth at the center of the bloom. So much so that you can use this plant to help eliminate certain insect problems in your garden or home. Of course, you'll have to put up with the smell, but if it's outside, it might not be so bad, and you won't have to deal with it as much. If you're wondering, with all these flowers, the smell is caused by compounds like diamonds, sulfur compounds, and phenolic molecules. The flowers also mimic decomposing animal matter with their hairs, color, and surface. After the flies lay their eggs, predatory ants enter the plant and eat all the larvae. Most species look the same, only varying in color. So, if you put a starfish next to the flower, you'd barely be able to tell which is which, and that's why they get that name. Some of these flowers can be quite large, sometimes exceeding 23 centimeters in diameter. They are also said to have medicinal uses, including treating pain, hysteria, and even lightning strikes. Additionally, the smell can suppress the human appetite. Number 16. Dragon arum. Also known by several other names, including one you might know, dragon lily. The dragon arum is interesting because it also produces a rotten meat smell, just like the corpse flowers I mentioned earlier. However, unlike those flowers, the dragon arum looks different and is also popular in Greece and the Balkans, where it grows. Another thing the dragon arum does is structure itself so that flies and other insects don't have many places to land freely. They need to be attracted to the right part of the plant, where the pollen will be deposited. Only after that are the insects released. Sometimes the plant even traps insects against its walls, ensuring enough time for pollen transfer. Think of it as a kind of trap. Once you enter, you'll certainly leave with something. Like the other plants I mentioned, the Dragonarum can heat itself to a certain temperature to better attract its pollinators. Unfortunately, it doesn't breathe fire to roast anything other than insects, like a real dragon. Interestingly, unlike other plants that prefer shade, the Dragonarum likes to stay in the sun all the time and, because of that, can withstand droughts, only needing watering during very dry periods. You could say these plants are tough and long-lasting. Number 17. Raffia arnaldi. I had to look twice at the flower known as Raffia arnaldi because if you search online, you'll notice it's also called the corpse flower. Someone either didn't realize or didn't care that two different flowers share the same name. The good news is that these flowers are truly different, although both emit a smell similar to rotten flesh. What sets this one apart from the previous example is that this plant is a parasite. That's right, it's a plant that needs a host to survive. And luckily, this perfect host isn't a human corpse. Don't worry, you might have been concerned for a moment. This type of parasite needs to attach itself to another host, which in this case is a special plant, and then suck the nutrients it obtains to grow. Of the 15 or 20 species of Raffia you might recognize, all share these characteristics in common. This directly contrasts with most plants, which can grow on their own through chlorophyll. Raffia lacks chlorophyll, so it depends on a host to get what it needs and then build the rest of its body. That's why you'll hardly ever see this plant in the wild unless it's fully flowering. Because without the big bloom, it's impossible to identify which plant it is. And it can only flower after growing through its host. It's truly diabolical, strange, and complicated, if you think about it. Things get even more exotic when you discover this parasite has the largest bloom of all plants. The flower can exceed 1 meter in diameter just in its flowering part. However, this growth cycle also explains why it needs to perform its stinky routine to ensure that when it blooms, it manages to spread its seeds and attract the carnivorous insects I mentioned earlier. It's really fascinating to think about two plants that look so different but have a very similar function to guarantee their survival. Number 18. The corpse flower. The corpse flower is not just an exotic plant, it's one of the most unique plants on the planet. Not to mention it's the largest plant in the world in terms of pure individual size. But don't think that means the flower is inviting you to visit it. The reason it's called the corpse flower is because of the smell it emits to attract its prey. Since the plant was discovered and transplanted in the late 1800s, people have been fascinated by this species, which is great because it's said there are only about 1,000 left in the wild. But why does it emit that rotten, dead smell? Ironically, this is part of its survival instinct, as insects like dung beetles, carrion flies, and other carnivorous insects are the main pollinators of this type of flower. These insects usually feed on dead meat, and the smell, together with the dark maroon color of the corpse flower, mimic a dead animal to attract these insects. As if that wasn't enough, to attract even more pollinators, the plant heats its body, making its thermal signature resemble that of a freshly deceased animal. It's also worth noting that this plant is truly huge, with the main part of the flower growing up to 4.6 meters tall. All this comes at a high cost, because unlike most plants, it doesn't have a regular blooming cycle. Instead, it only blooms when it has enough energy to do so. Number 19. Baseball plant. Now let's head to South Africa to meet a species affectionately called the baseball plant. If you look at it, you'll understand exactly why it got that name. The plant is incredibly round and even has a sort of seam that resembles a baseball's stitching. It can reach about 15 centimeters in diameter when fully grown. Besides its curious appearance, it draws attention because of its growth cycle. When we think of plants, we imagine they grow quickly, or at least within an expected cycle, from seed to adult plant. But the baseball plant grows slowly, which harms it in several ways. In nature, for some reason, people love this plant and harvest it a lot. This is a problem because it happens very frequently, and this has significantly harmed its population. To make things worse, the plant only produces about 2 or 3 seeds, which is not much to ensure a strong population growth. The irony is that despite being threatened in the wild, we don't need to worry about its extinction just yet, because many people cultivate this plant at home. In other words, humans both harm and protect it at the same time. And if you're thinking about having one, it's best to be careful. It belongs to a group of plants that are toxic, as they produce a type of sap that can cause severe skin irritation, especially if it comes into contact with the eyes. So, if you find a plant that looks like a baseball, it's better to do as players do and wear a glove before picking it up. Number 20. Tropical pitcher plants. I've mentioned one species like this before, but now I'm going to talk about the tropical pitcher plant, which is the most traditional pitcher plant you probably know. They are both exotic and absolutely terrifying. They grow in places with little nitrogen, but use this to their advantage by attracting their prey with their sweet smell and nectar. That's right, they are flowers with a sweet scent. When an insect enters to feed on the nectar, it gets completely trapped and can't escape at all. The plant uses various acids it produces to dissolve the insect and thus obtain the nutrients it needs. It's a plant that guarantees a slow and prolonged death for its prey and gets exactly what it wants, which is truly monstrous. Thanks so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed our content, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like. Also, check out other interesting videos that are appearing right now on your screen, and I'll see you in the next video. Until next time.